and we are on YouTube. So for everyone who's going to ask me for the recording. Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this morning. If we've never met before, I'm Naama Blonder. I'm an architect and urban planner with Smart Density based out of Toronto. And we came up with this roundtable idea, focusing on urban design ideas and initiatives. And we had one rule, or we have one rule. The project is not based in Toronto. The idea is that we will really learn best practices and what other cities are doing. And it's pretty cold here in Toronto. And I moved to Toronto 10 years ago. And I remember my first winter. First of all, it was the first time that I saw snow in my life. And also I thought, why Toronto treats itself as if it's just a regular city with no real winter or extreme weather in the winter. If you look at our urban design and our public realm, doesn't really account for the weather and the fact that we have 7 months of the year that are pretty cold. So today I am more than excited, and I think it is super relevant, and it's just the beginning of winter, to have a group of experts from 3 other Canadian cities. Usually we have experts from all over the world. Today we focused in Canada, and I think that is fascinating. We have Edmonton, Montreal, and oh my God, what is the third one?
Winnipeg.
Winnipeg, thank you. Sorry, I'm very excited, as I said. So we are going to start with Edmonton, and Ayla Tanaka from Edmonton is going to share with us the city's winter guidelines, design guidelines. I'm going to post the land acknowledgement in the chat. As a first-generation Canadian, I have written a unique land acknowledgement. Please, Ayla, take it from here. Enjoy, everyone, and thank you for joining us today.
Great, thank you. Let me just share my screen. Okay, great. So thank you for having me. We have 10 minutes, so this will be fast and furious. So hang on to your toques, and here we go. Excuse me, I come to you today from Treaty 6 territory and the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 4. We are located on the traditional territories of many First Nations, such as the Naheo, Dene, Anishinaabe, Saulteaux, Nakota Iska, Nakota Sioux, and Niitsitapi peoples. We also acknowledge this as the Métis homeland and home of one of the largest communities of Inuit south of the 60th parallel. Now, in Naheowen, or Cree, one of the local Indigenous languages, I have been told that the word for city is Utinau, which means the heart of the people or where the people are. And I would like us to keep that in mind today as we talk about our cities in winter. Cities are where people are, where we live, play, and share. And so people must be at the heart of how we plan, design, and encourage play in our cities. Now, people are definitely at the heart of Edmonton's winter city strategy and our design guidelines. So our new winter story started over 10 years ago when headlines like this were very common. How to survive the Edmonton winter, a guide for frigid newbies and frosty vets. And even Maclean's magazine was asking if we had become a nation of winter wusses. Now, we weren't always like this. We have photos from over 100 years ago of people in Edmonton enjoying winter. But in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, we learned to escape it. We closed many of our parks in the winter, and we designed our city so that we could stay inside as much as possible. And really, we did become winter wimps. About 12 years ago, one of our city councillors decided that we needed to change how we build our city, and indeed, we needed to change our winter culture. So we created a task force that was made up of citizens who were supported by city staff. Now, we asked residents of Edmonton what would make them fall in love with their city in winter, and we received hundreds of ideas. Now, we used the iceberg mental model to approach change because we didn't want to just deal with festivals and events and cross-country ski trails in our parks, those really visible things that we see at the top of the iceberg. We wanted to change the attitudes and approaches to winter all of those unseen, unconscious things that we do. And we really wanted to use a winter lens in all of our city work, from programming to park design, to the photos we use to promote our city, and even to how we allocate our city budget. And so we developed Edmonton's Winter City Strategy, and we have 64 actions over 4 pillars: winter life, winter design, winter economy, and our winter story. So citizens and city staff were involved together right from the very beginning and still in all the work that we do, including the winter design guidelines, which is what I'm here today for. So these guidelines were a key action in our winter design pillar. Now, Edmonton, like Toronto, has been built like many other North American cities, and we have not designed for our northern context. Now, the guidelines are helping us change that. They were developed by a group of local planners, designers, architects, landscape architects, builders, community developers, and city staff. They are about comfort and safety, but they also focus on accessibility, equity, and dignity. They're really about great urban design in general, but we concentrate on winter-related elements with a focus on placemaking. Now, we also took a policy to City Council, and this means that all new city-led developments must consider the guidelines and 4-season design. Now, the guidelines have 2 goals to improve our outdoor experiences: in our streetscapes, to design our communities for winter comfort, safety, access, and aesthetic appeal, and in our open spaces to design elements for winter fun, activity, beauty, and interest. Now, please keep in mind that these guidelines were developed in Edmonton for Edmonton, so our winter context is a bit different from yours. For example, we have more hours of darkness, and we tend to be a bit colder than Toronto. But there are 5 principles of winter design that are universal for all winter cities. And they are: block wind, capture sunshine, use color, add lighting, and then plan for the right type of infrastructure. Now, these principles are woven throughout the guidelines, and I'll give you examples of each of them. But first, here's how they can be used together in a public space. So we can use buildings to block the prevailing winter winds. We can add color to the buildings, ensure that sunshine reaches the active areas in the afternoon, add lighting for evening use, and then provide the right type of infrastructure, such as warming spaces, maybe a skating rink, or a place for snow piles for children. So let's go through them one at a time. So we can block wind from a macro or a micro scale. This is an example of blocking wind from a park on a macro or a neighborhood scale. This is the plan for the new Blatchford community. It's a redevelopment of our old Edmonton Municipal Airport, which is just a little bit north of our downtown. A protective hill at the north end will redirect the prevailing winds over and around the park space and the neighborhood. And then the hills can be used for tobogganing in the wintertime. Now, on a micro scale, vegetation and landscaping can be used to block wind, and we can take advantage of the existing topography. So hedges can protect pathways from drifting snow, coniferous trees can be used to block and redirect wind, and hills will also redirect wind. The bottom of a hill often can be a nice, sheltered, comfortable space for gathering. Now think about how hot it gets in the summer and people tend to seek out shade. In the winter, it's just the flip side. We're looking for sunshine. So the best direction for patios and public spaces to face to get that maximum sunshine in the winter is on the south side of buildings. And then the west side is the second best option. Now, I've mentioned both blocking wind and capturing sunshine. And it's important to note that these 2 principles are, in many ways, the 2 most important. If you can block wind and capture sunshine at the same time, you can create a much more comfortable microclimate. So a sheltered, sunny seating area can actually feel 10 to 15 degrees warmer than the surrounding area. Now, this is quite significant. If it's -10, it can feel like 0 or +5 in a space. Now, sun shadow studies are a great tool to help us design our cities for all season. This one was created for Edmonton's latitude, and it's showing shadows of the same building with 2 towers on a podium. Diagram on the left is the summer solstice at 9 a.m., noon, and 3 p.m. And the diagram on the right is the winter solstice at the same times. Now you can see that parts of the north side of that building will not get any sunshine in the winter. So this is not where you want to design a gathering space for year-round use. Now we must also think about how buildings will block sunshine when we put them in a park space or an open space. So in Edmonton, we're actually not very good about using color on our buildings yet, but we're starting to see a lot more murals. But even small touches of color can make a big difference. They can inject fun, for example, touches of color on a bike rack or in the gazebo. Color can also come from landscaping, like the tall yellow grasses. So be strategic with lighting. Too much and it becomes ineffective. Now, some communities such as Reykjavik on the top or Jasper on the bottom are using dark sky principles in their lighting schemes to reduce the amount of light spread or light pollution. And you can see in these photos, the architectural features of the buildings are also highlighted, which makes for an interesting urban nightscape. But also be creative with lighting. And remember that not all lighting has to be permanent. All of these examples are of temporary lighting features. Now, lighting can also be used for placemaking. We partnered with our Arts Council to add light boxes with art in them to a dark alley. And then the other photo is a permanent neon sign museum in our downtown. Like lighting, infrastructure can be permanent or temporary. For example, a refrigerated concrete base for a skating trail or a natural gas-fed fireplace with a fixed grate are permanent features in 2 of our parks. For temporary, we put out cross-country ski racks on our golf courses in the winter, and we have also piloted putting warming huts in some of our parks. Now, finally, designing for winter supports everyday winter life and is helping us create an invitation for people to get out and enjoy the spaces in winter. So thank you. I will now pass you over to Olivier.
Hi, everybody. So, I'm trying to see where I can share the screen.
And there's a little green arrow at the bottom.
Yeah. It's just once I get into the menu, it looks like it's okay. Sorry about that. Okay. It's kind of a new computer, and apparently I have to.
Yeah,
do
we
you
can
see
see
it?
it. Yeah.
Great, we did it. So I'm Olivier. I work. We co-founded the Lab d'Hiver, so the Winter Lab, and I work for Rue Principale, which is Main Street, and is a organization that works for vibrant downtowns and village cores all around Quebec and Francophone Canada. So yeah, today we want to talk a bit about an experience that was made in Montreal in 2021. But first, let's see Lab d'Hiver, what we do. We want to reimagine the daily winter and add some, proximity winter parks going on, and try to invent some new kind of activities, try to bring back curling into parks, structures where you can sculpt light and have fun with it and create all kinds of shapes. And yeah, so we had the mandate by the Montreal Design Montreal to kind of look at the Montreal winter stations, and we had to be out there in the cold and monitoring the impact and quality of different stations, which is a really nice spot to be. So because how often in your life you have to you have to take the time to just be out there and observe what is going on. So there was 17 winter stations and 17 like main streets all over Montreal. So we had 17 design teams that were creating all of those. So 17 point of views about how to create like a vibrant placet or have an impact on the main street atmosphere. So basically, that created all kinds of projects. So we were just after COVID, and the city wanted to help the business streets. So it was a very fast program. It was not something that was thought of like years ahead. It was like in a couple of months they came out with that. So that was like this feeling of urgency also that was part of this. So just to show you a bit of some pictures that were of the projects that were made, that those lighting baubles that were climbing up the church in Verdun, these kind of sculptures, and these little ribbons. You had to get them into some of the local stores, and you like people of the neighborhood could help doing this little pathway of big shiny faces. We had things like that were people were passing by. They were, what's going on here? If you could like a couple of chairs and a fire pit in the middle, it would have been clear like it's a place to hang out. But at the same time, you see all those prints, those footprints. It was very popular with kids. Just go out there and climb on stuff. We had this one where it was supposed to be an aurora borealis in the middle of a deck that was like in a really small park close to a street. It worked quite well, when -5 +5 degrees. It was a very nice place to have the sun and everything Haila talked about. But as soon as it was colder than that, and there would be nobody there. There was not much to do outside of that, so it's important to have this good mix of activities that you can do, as well as how easy it is to maintain, and of course microclimates. So you could see on you had those wheelchairs sometimes, this little poussette baby carriers. It's always a good sign when you see those. We had a light show. This one was very nice. The designers were testing each individual light could be they could like configure the color and the intensity of the light, so you could create like there was a light show going on in a not always like something that was very intense. Sometimes it was just like moody, but then at some point it would like create something with a higher intensity, and that would work well. We had those little sheds in a park, kind of a alien dropping into a park. It was quite nice, but it's like more of a decor thing. These, so people interested in designs were like, "Whoa, what is this?" Like, it was like a Elvis playing when you were passing by. And finally, that was one of the stations that worked the most. People were really interacting with it because of the music, because it was a bit kitsch. And yeah, so see all kinds of things, of materials. What worked really, what we learned from it is, first of all, it was kind of a thing to me to see people walking in the streets, and when they walk on the main street, they're more into a functional mode, like they're getting back from work or going to buy groceries, or the kids at the kindergarten, and people like their perception of space, it's really close. Then it's like you're kind of regrouping, right? You're like keeping your warmth, and you don't see much what's happening around you, and if you go into a more recreational mode, well, you have to be dressed properly to do that. So most of those stations, like they would not create interactions at all, because people like don't pay attention too much to their environments when they want to keep their warmth. And this is really like something interesting that we observed. But so the stations that worked best were the ones that were immediately into, like, just by the side of the street. Like the site selection has to be like really by high pedestrian traffic flow in order to have an impact. The comfort and microclimates, I think Ayla talked about it a lot, but of course, to me, you have to design a space like you would camp there. like the first question is, where will I put the fire? And you will put the fire where there's the most sun and it's protected for the winds. So if you think about it this way, then it all starts from there, or the fire pit to me. Even if you can't do a fire pit, like where would you put it? So yeah, microclimate, you know, you have a stone wall, it gets the sun, it gives back warmth. And you have those trees beside it that create shades in the summertime. So this place would be like nice any season. Uses appropriation. Of course, what you have to do is to make move. You have to create movement. People have to move to get warmth. So either it's like you have a couple of stations and then you have some kind of itinerary, or you have to think your site in order to make people moving and create activities. Either it's curling or a walk around or a sled or whatever new winter activities you want to create and innovate with this. I think Liz will inspire you guys a lot with you know, we can, there's all kinds of ways to play in winter, and probably most of them don't exist at this time, and we have to invent them. So especially in an urban area. So yeah, the sounds, animated lights, flags, you know, it creates animation that captivate the people's attention, and which is very tough to do in wintertime. It has to be alive. Otherwise, the space readability. So I guess you got that. There's a good example on the top and a bad one at the bottom, even if it's in French. But you know, the human scaled sites and environments, it needs coziness and warmth, and you know, it's tough to create a nice space in a very big park. So sometimes you have to create a centrality and really build around that, and gives a clear message that it's what's to use. So the Adirondack chairs, you know, everybody knows what it's all about. You sit and you rest, and it sends a clear message that this place is for you, and to take a moment and when it's nice outside. But at the same time, we got to work on the urban furniture. You know, I don't know if you ever saw a classic bench, city bench that people sit on in wintertime. It's usually like cold, and you don't want to sit there. You have the feeling you will kind of freeze. So you had these benches that were, you know, snow was passing through. But I was always thinking about doing a bum rest, you know, something that you don't have to sit. It's just, you lean on a little bit. It's vertical, it doesn't accumulate snow on it. And yeah, I love it when people listen to me. People from Montanzelier, they did it, and it works well. And then yeah, there was good materials that were tested. So there's so much to say about recommendations, about what we observed. But the essential thing is, well, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the people who use a public realm in the wintertime, and see all those small places that could benefit not only the atmosphere, but things to do, and what will be our Saturday morning on the main street. Like, what's the run that we'll make? We'll go to the bakery, have a little cafe, go to the park with the kids, and then we have the feeling of, okay, we've been outside, and now we can like sit by the fireplace and read a book inside, and well, you know, this feeling of okay, we did it. We winter's great. So that was it for me. Sorry for my English, but the important is to try our best. So Liz, please.
Hi, everybody. Let me just share my screen. There we go. All right. Okay, hi, I'm Liz Reeford. I'm the principal landscape architect at Public City. We are an architecture and landscape architecture office. We're based in Winnipeg, but we also have a office in Toronto. Although our hearts are in Winnipeg, we work across the country in Alberta and Manitoba and Ontario mostly. We do a lot of work in winter. We have to, because of the place that we are based in. Winnipeg is probably the most wintry of winter cities. We talk about it as having a very committed winter, which is very different than Toronto. It snows usually and freezes and stays for 5 or 6 months. That probably will start to change, but right now we're still lucky enough to have, we can plan on winter, and that means that we can really invest in winter infrastructure. And I'm going to specifically talk about one project today, but I just want to note some of the other stuff we're doing. Fire becomes, really important in a lot of our projects. So whenever we can incorporate that, we do. And obviously making people active and providing opportunities for active winter social infrastructure, like the toboggan slide up in the top middle image there. And of course, Hygge House, which is one of our projects, the fluorescent yellow warming hut, which is on the skating trail in Winnipeg every winter. It's a project that was initiated by the Forks, which is a fabulous place in Winnipeg that actually has as many visitors in the winter as it does in the summer, which when it's -30, that's quite a feat. I'm start with this project as an introduction to Croque Curl, which I'm going to talk about. But this project, Hygge House, was a kind of exploration of what makes the prairie winters really prairie. And it was a cabin that was cut in half, and we filled it with snowshoes and fish on the wall and cross-country skis, and painted everything fluorescent yellow. But one of the key pieces was this crokinole board, which we knew we had to have, and which people actually brought their own crokinole chips to play at Hygge House until it was stolen after the first year. And so that project really made us think about crokinole, and we would often play it in our office. It's a game that's shown on the left here that is very Canadian. You'll find it in a lot of cottages and around. It often comes out like after dinner, it goes on a dinner table and families gather around. It's almost unknown in other countries, and it's actually only very well known in certain areas of Canada, the prairies and Ontario in particular. Other places, people have no idea what I'm talking about. But playing it one summer in her office, we started thinking about how similar to curling it is, and how amazing it would be to combine the two things. And we thought, for sure, this has been done already. It's such a no-brainer, it seems like, but sometimes some of the best ideas are no-brainers like that. And we did some research and found out that it hadn't been done. So we did it. And we spent about 2 weeks of time, which was, useful time in the end, but we decided to just brainstorm this for a couple of weeks in our office and come up with a whole new game, which we called Croque Curl. And it's a combination of crokinole and curling. We originally proposed it to be on the river as part of the skating trail at the Forks. And we thought that it would be quite a bit bigger than what it ended up being. We devised this whole kind of set of rules and figured out how the whole thing would be played, originally with brooms, we thought. But we had no one to build it. So I was meeting at the Forks and actually brought this piece of paper with me, literally in my back pocket, folded up, and brought it to somebody there and said, this is a good idea, we should do this. And they called me the next day and said, sure, let's do it. So we built it the first year. This was actually in 2017. And it was like an instant hit. People loved it right away. We revised it a little bit so it fit in this quite urban space. People loved it because nobody was an expert. It created a common ground with people. I'm just going to note, because you don't see it in any other images, the two little boxes up at the top of the rink were the storage boxes for the curling rocks, which were taken away after the first like 3 days because no one stole them. Everybody loved it so much that we didn't need those anymore. But that was a sort of issue at the beginning, with how to keep all these curling rocks safe. Yeah, people took care of this sort of right away. It was amazing to see the love that was given to this this thing. It was one of those things where people were like, yes, I've thought of that. That's such a good idea. But no one had actually ever done it before. So there was a lot of talk right at the beginning of the project about what we should do with it, if we should trademark this thing or copyright it or something. And in the end, we decided that we really wanted to just give it away. So there was so much interest in it that we posted the rules and like a how-to on our website, which is still there. Every year at this time, I start getting a whole bunch of questions about it. In the first year, it was built all over Canada in about 10 places. And then in subsequent years, it's sort of really spread. It's in many small towns. It's scalable. It's really inexpensive to make. And it's actually even being made in the United States in a few places. Here you can see, this was actually, this was in the first like couple years that it was a thing. There was all these Croquet Curl events all over the place, and you can see all the different iterations of it, from Saskatoon, which was a super high-end installation of it, to just like on a river with like wooden poles. People started, like, it was becoming part of like social media all over the place. And some things work better than others. Plastic pylons don't work so well for the Croquet Curl bollard posts. And there's been a lot of innovations over the years with it as well. And again, this has almost been nothing to do with us. It's had just a complete life of its own. The forks, because the Croquet Curl or the curling rocks were getting so much use, they were breaking. They actually made their own rocks, which they bring out every year, with kind of that fake ice on the bottom, with a rubber bumper around the side. The weight of these rocks is what's really important for the size of the rink, but it can really be anything once you get the weight right. Saskatoon has implemented a Croquet Curl rink, at least for a few years. And you can see that it really works in an urban setting really well. So it can just be made in a parking lot. Again, it can be scaled down and it still works pretty well. Everyone in every age group can play it as well. And we've really found that a lot of people have a really deep connection to both crokinole and curling, and all these stories start coming out when people play. It brings back good memories for people. And for the most part, it's mostly been community members or community organizations that have built Croquet Curl, except for one, which is actually in Toronto, which is at Stacked. This is on a refrigerated ice surface. They did work with us a little bit to modify this. You don't actually usually stand on the ice to play it at Stacked. And they also charge a lot of money to play it. So sometimes we were like, shoot, we really missed the ball on that one, but actually we're happy with how it's worked out with communities. It's been on the Rick Mercer Report and the National, and it was even on As It Happens, The Amazing Race Canada. So it's really become part of like just Canadian culture. And then the last couple of years, it's been implemented in the United States, and they have absolutely no idea what crokinole is at all, but it still works. And there's a US Croquet Curl Championship now. So we're going to try and organize an international championship soon. And last winter, it was actually built on the river for the first time. So this is at the Forks in Winnipeg. And it was great, 5 or 6 years after it was first built in kind of a constrained space, that last year they invested in it on the river walk. So it was part of the infrastructure, and it was great to see it there, and it worked really well. So it kind of gave it like a new, different life again, which I think is going to continue happening for a long time, I hope. So we love sharing in how everybody's making it, and see how it transforms these winter landscapes. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. There are actually a lot of questions. We only have a few minutes, not even 10, because the idea is that it will be 10, 10, 10. Okay, Olivia, I see you responding to some, but I think a lot of it, and I'm going to merge some questions, okay, Olivia? But the question is, how do you work with the municipalities? Is it all on public land? What's the budget? Can you just take us to behind the scenes of like the approval process of the installations?
Yeah. So it was very rushed, as I said, and I think designers had like 6 weeks to come up with the idea and build it, and they had $39,000 per stations, including design fees and materials and installation. So that's yeah, you have money to do something, but at the same time, it's not like a crazy big project. So yeah, there was this idea of there was a rush, and that was the economic development service that came with the budget for this. So total it was I think 600,000 to 700,000 for all those winter stations. And it was really a COVID measure, so it didn't came back the year after. Honestly, I guess you could feel in my presentation there was a lot of trial and errors and a lot of errors, a lot of things that didn't work at all. If you have like one station in the middle of one single street, that the impact is not enough. If you go to in Winnipeg and have those warming huts, well, the impact comes because there's so much of them, and it creates like a pathwork you have to follow. And well, if you would talk to the Mr. Hargraves, Liz, what is his name? Peter Hargraves.
Peter Hargraves, yeah.
Yeah, well, he would tell you, well, it's not really warming huts. It just makes you move, and the movement what is warming you up. So to have a lot of different stations and to have the chance to take that walk is what is going to make it like work. So yeah, I went a bit too far.
No, not at all. It's a great answer. Ayla, what pushback do you hear from the private sector? Are there any items on the design guidelines that are very hard for the development community to deliver?
No, actually, what's interesting is that because so much of the development community was involved in developing those guidelines, they started using them like when they were still in draft form. And we've seen some developers actually use winter as a marketing tool for some of the newer communities, especially when they set up, a park space, and then they say, and this is the area for skating in the winter. You can use it year round. We have a skate change place, a place to warm up. Here's a fire pit. So they're actually using winter design as a selling feature, which is really interesting.
That's great.
I will say one thing though, we did a bit of a survey in the spring to just kind of gauge how things were going with the strategy in general. But what I heard was actually some of the roadblocks that they're running into are with some of the city development officers. So that tells me that we need to do a bit more work internally to figure out how can we help the developers actually use these guidelines and get some of these ideas going. So that's
it's not
the
getting
roadblock is internal. Yeah.
At the pyramid stage, right?
Yeah.
Liz, I am going to again merge two questions that are somewhat, the urban versus suburban question on winter design, and if we, if most of these happen in a more of a downtown core, and the age friendly. It specifically was about senior and elderly, but for me, it's just young children experience the similar challenges when it comes to accessibility. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think in terms of, I mean, it's a real mix in terms of urban and suburban. Some of the projects I showed were very urban. Croquet Curl in particular can be modified for sort of any condition, which I think is what has made it so successful. We're really lucky in Winnipeg that we have the Riverwalk that's very urban, but is a big open space in the winter that completely changes the way people interact with the city. And you get a view of the city in a whole different kind of way that most people don't get in the summer. The Riverwalk has really exploded since COVID. It used to be, there's two rivers that go through Winnipeg. It used to be sort of on one more right downtown, but one of the rivers that goes through a more residential area, people have been taking it upon themselves to extend the skating trail really far, and have started to build their own kind of like stations along the river trail. So there's curling rinks and skating rinks and fire pits and like all sorts of stuff that has just been a complete community initiative. And it really runs right from the downtown right out to the suburbs. So it's pretty cool. And like the best time to visit Winnipeg is in January, February to experience it. It's just something completely different. In terms of age, obviously that's really important from all ages. Croquet Curl again is quite accessible to everybody. There's not a lot of barriers. There's a little bit, but there's lots of different ways to play it. You can kind of nudge the rocks along, or you can throw them pretty hard. Kids can definitely play it, and we also really noticed like a multi-generational kind of interest in it. So a lot of times there's like an older person standing on the side of it with kids playing and telling stories about curling or crokinole or something like that. So it's really opened up conversations, I think, and a lot of our other projects in winter also deal with accessibility, like the toboggan slide that I showed is an accessible toboggan slide. And it's like designed to allow people with mobility issues to toboggan, but it's also really taking into consideration how kids move around in the winter, where they're in huge snowsuits, and walking upstairs and holding things is actually really hard when you're completely bundled up like that. So like allowing parents to move their kids around spaces easily is also important on toboggans or strollers or whatever.
Thank you for that answer. Okay, Ayla, Liz, and Olivia, thank you so much for your time this morning. We had a wonderful turnaround, and let's see. Happy winter, everyone, and let's embrace winter. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.